I'm Lauren MacLeash, middays on Cities 97. My daughter Abigail is enrolled at Learningrx, and she has seen amazing progress in school, and more so than I could ever imagine. But I want to tell the story today with another parent whose son is also going through training at Learningrx. And please welcome Ann Price.
Thank you. I'm
Thank
happy
you
to be here.
Thank you for coming. Ann, you're from Maple Grove.
I am.
And your son Leighton is enrolled at Learningrx.
Yes.
So tell me about Leighton and about what brought you to Learningrx.
Well, in about his kindergarten year, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and we were seeing some significant behavioral issues and just general inattentivity, impulsivity, all the things that come with ADHD. And after observing him in the classroom over the next year and a half, I started to see where it was definitely going to get in the way of his learning. And that's where my biggest concern is, if we didn't do something, we'd be dealing with a child that it was incredibly deficit in education.
So when you think of, when you say something, what was your first thought? Well, we have to help him with his curriculum. We have to.
Right. We looked at, I mean, as an educator myself, I looked at ways that I could help tutor him at home, help with reading and do, you know, some sort of things like that. But with ADHD, I didn't know really how to address the inattentiveness, the impulsivity, some of more of the kind of cognitive things going on with him. And so I was sort of at a loss, reading a lot of books, talking to colleagues, other parents, and most of what I was hearing, my options were kind of talk therapy. So we did have him see someone for a while, and then the other option that was presented was medication, and just we're not comfortable with that right now. So,
and so now what? You know, it's like,
exactly.
Okay, well, I've done all the traditional things. There's got to be something else.
Yeah, I actually have a colleague that I lean on quite a bit, and she happened to be familiar with Learningrx. Her daughter had gone through the program, and she started to explain it to me, and it was sort of like, really, you're kidding me, this is out there, this exists. And at first I thought to myself, how do I sell this to my husband? So she quickly provided me with some of the literature and contact information, and I brought home the book and started reading. And matter of fact, my husband and I were so engaged in the book. It was a turning point, I think, in an option for our child.
One of the things with our decision was that it is so different from just sitting down and, okay, we're going to read this over and over, and whatever you're bringing home from school, we're just going to repeat and do it over and over. But that wasn't helping. There was an underlying problem there, and the assessment test, which Learningrx has you take first, was eye-opening. And I've said before, it was like a map. It's like, okay, her attention span is like a 9 out of 100. So we knew that was an issue, but then her processing skills. So what was that like when you had Leighton take the assessment test?
Very similar, and probably more so for my husband, because my background is in education and psychology, and so I understand through intelligence testing and different cognitive things in education. I read it and sort of said to myself, well, duh, it's been there the whole time. My husband had sort of the same aha, to be able to see with Leighton that he had problems with auditory processing, short-term memory, which with ADHD, giving 3 tasks, by the time he gets to the second task, he's often doing something else. And being able to name it was so powerful. So yes, to see that assessment and say, of course this is what's happening, because I could think of specific examples once I saw the assessment.
And so then when you had the assessment, you sat down with the center director, and, you know, and this is my experience, outlined, okay, this is how we're going to help the short-term memory. This is how we're going to help the long-term memory, the auditory processing, the understanding. And you're like, this makes total sense. But from a mom or parents on the outside, they're thinking, well, that's not tutoring. That's not, you're going to be playing games, and you're going to be doing, but once you get in there, you realize they're never going to learn what they need to learn if they don't correct those cognitive issues first.
Right. And I always attribute it, when I'm talking to other adults, I talk about, you know, having a mental block. I mean, that is what happens to Leighton and he's almost frozen. And so for me to expect him to retain and learn in the classroom it was so unrealistic at that point. And so doing the exercises, you know, seemed sort of silly and fun at first, like games, which is helpful in training,
Yeah.
especially partner training.
Mm-hmm.
But then you start to see that development in being able to sustain that short-term memory, and it's powerful. I mean, he has surpassed even me. And, you know, as an educated person, I think, oh, I can do this too. And it's a fun game that we play back and forth.
So Leighton started working with a trainer.
Yep.
Several days during the week,
Yep.
weekends.
Yep.
So what did you see? What was the first signs you saw when you're like, wow, this is working?
The biggest aha that we had, actually, we were on vacation and I was doing partner training, was helping him with visualization. And I don't know, it's hard to explain, but visualization is so powerful in language development and in memory and different things that we can do. And I tried to do one of the skills with him, and I used he's very into Yu-Gi-Oh cards, used his cards, and I was explaining to him how we can drop certain vowels and consonants in words, and he can still remember those and pull it back together, and now do it forwards and backwards for his auditory processing. And he looked at me and he said, and I get emotional when I think about it, he goes, I get it. I can see it. And it was just the two of us, and I'm like, okay, now we can move forward. And just to see him understand that where he had a deficit, but that he could learn from it, was so powerful to me.
Right.
And so
self-correcting, where they
yes.
realize, oh no, that's not right. I did
Yep.
this, and you're like, wow, she knew that.
yeah. And in a 9-year-old, it doesn't easily come. So
yeah.
So
So he's still in training.
Yep.
What's the biggest change to date? How are things going?
You know, I think I look at self-regulation. You know, I work with high school students, and it's very difficult for a lot of high school students to self-regulate. And so to see Leighton develop those skills to kind of do a cognitive shift when he sits down to do like a homework assignment, and to say, okay, I'm going to read the instructions, then I'm going to do the next step. That is a skill he did not have prior to doing Learningrx. And then I can fast forward and look at him as a high school student, and having to shift from class to class and being able to manage other teachers' approaches, I think is such a challenge for high school students. I see that every day. And for him, to see him regulate that has been so powerful for me. That's the biggest impact that I see in the moment.
Our children are young, 7 and 9, or 8 and 9.
Right.
And as a counselor at a high school, how do you see this skill set for children who could benefit from Learningrx? Not just young children,
Right.
but high school children.
You know, it's so invaluable at any age. I mean, I see students struggle all the time with organization and time management, and you know, just frustration, test anxiety, not being able to approach a task or an assignment and not understand why. And then there's a lot of personalization. And so, I mean, I see Learningrx as a program that is applicable to anybody, probably most valuable at the adolescent level.
Yes, my concern with Abigail being young was that I needed her self-esteem to be there.
Absolutely.
Because if their self-esteem is not there at that young age, they don't want to go to school.
Yep.
By the time they get past the learning to read, learning to do math,
Right.
and then processing that information, it's just a wall of frustration.
Yep.
So I can see totally us nipping it in the bud early,
Yeah.
but to see the success of high school students
Yeah.
and college students
Oh, absolutely.
going through the program has been extremely successful.
Yeah. I mean, in education, we know everyone has a different way of learning, and I think at a minimum, Learningrx has provided us with such language, even, you know, language on where some of the deficits are and how to build those deficits. I mean, where I can see it's applicable, you know, at any age. And for a high school student to have language over why they're being frustrated, why they're struggling with that subject.
The why is so important.
It's
like,
huge.
why can't I do this?
Yeah.
And that answering that question is so important to children at that 15,
Right.
16-year-old.
Right, and powerful emotionally.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, every kid wants to experience success and feel good at something. With students that deal with cognitive sort of deficiencies, I mean, it's so terribly frustrating. So to give that common language, to be able to talk about it, for them to be able to identify, you know, why they're struggling and say, this is because I have to work on my short-term memory. So
Right, identifying the
Yep.
problem and then figuring
Yep.
it out and solving it.
Yep, absolutely.
What would you say to parents right now who are experiencing the same problem with their own children, or they have friends, neighbors, relatives who have the same?
I mean, at a minimum, go and get them assessed. Get them assessed, see the information for what it's worth, see if it's applicable to you, and educate yourself. At a minimum, you know, just learning and identifying where your child is having difficulty has power in itself. You know, you may choose to not move forward, but just the knowledge is powerful.
So the assessment test is the why for parents. It is the map that will lead you down a road to your child understanding and processing information for years to come. A skill set that is
invaluable.
So the map is the why. The assessment test is the why, and the assessment test right now for Cities 97 listeners is at half price. And I highly recommend you take the assessment test if your child is struggling and find out exactly why and how Learningrx can help you. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.